Hi everyone, welcome back. Hope you had a great week. Listened to all those great presentations. Home Builders Week, EAA. My understanding is it was a record crowd this week, so third year, that's great. So, it's come to my attention lately through some DAR work and after propellers are returned from overhaul that people don't understand that you really need to make certain you set the low pitch stops on a constant speed propeller. So what's that all about, Nick? So let's talk a little bit about a constant speed propeller. Basically, what the constant speed propeller allows us to do is adjust the blade angle such that at takeoff, we can get full rated RPM out of the engine. And the only way we get full rated RPM out of the engine is allow it to spin up at rated RPM, which in this IO 540 and most of the O360s, IO 360s, are 2,700 RPM. So that's when we get the full 260 or 180 or 218 horsepower out of the engine, full rated RPM. So in order to do that, we want to make certain that we've got the low pitch blade set properly. And the other component for a constant speed propeller is the governor. That's this guy here. The governor actually takes low pressure, typically 80 psi oil pressure in the engine, and through its own internal gear-driven oil pump, it ups that pressure around 275 to over 300 psi in some cases. And then it runs it through a hollow crankshaft at this end, up through the hub of the propeller, and then with pistons in there, that's how these blades change angles. So we want to make certain something very important, that the governor is not controlling the prop at full throttle RPM. So the way we're going to do that, you can check that when you first run your airplane engine up, is run it to full throttle while you've got it tied down. It's a nose gear, sometimes the brakes and chocks will hold it. If it's a tail dragger, I would encourage you to go ahead and tie the tail down and make sure you have the flaps up and the stick full back. Go to full throttle. And at full throttle, start to move your propeller lever back. If immediately you get a decrease in propeller RPMs, that tells you the governor is controlling that. So what you're going to want to do is come out here to your governor, and here's your adjustment screws. You have to cut the safety wire if it's already done, loosen up this lock nut, and then back this screw out so we move this more forward. Okay, we want to get the governor not controlling the propeller. Once we're certain this isn't controlling the propeller, we want to set up the low blade pitch stops. So we've got about 40 to 60 maximum RPMs less than rated RPMs at full throttle. So usually you get this done in a couple of runs. And to do that, we're looking at an MT propeller. And in the video, there will be a still shot of a Hartzell propeller because the adjustment's just a little bit different up front. You can see here on the MT, there's two very large nuts. And you go from the side and everybody can see the two nuts here. So one's a lock nut. We're going to back this one off, okay? And by the way, it's a clockwise turn off. You can see by the threads, reverse threads.
Is the safety wire holding it on?
Yeah, the safety wire keeps these locked once we tighten them down after we're finished. So you got to cut the safety wire to get started here. You're going to unloosen this one. You're going to need two wrenches, obviously. Loosen this one. And then what I'll do is take a felt pen and make a mark on one of the flats and against the propeller hub. You probably can see where I've done this one. There's a couple of marks already right there where when I set this one. So now what we're going to do is run our engine to full throttle RPM, and we want around 2660, 2650. Once you get, and if we don't have that, let's say we still have 2700. We're going to go ahead and adjust this, and your manual will tell you which way to adjust this to make this get a bigger bite. In the case of 2700 RPMs, we want a little larger bite here. Basically, we're going to set up this constant speed propeller to act like a fixed pitch propeller at full throttle static RPMs. So make a mark, and then the book will tell you, sometimes it'll say a half a turn is good for 60 or 80 RPMs or something. What I'll do is usually just move it a half a turn and see what I get. And then you can dial it in usually with two more engine runs. So again, we want full throttle RPMs around 2650, 2660, somewhere around there, less than rated RPM. Why do we want it less? Because we're at static. Once the aircraft starts rolling and we unload this propeller, right about the time we break ground, we're going to get about 2690, 2700 RPMs. And that's when we want the governor to come into play. So once you've got this dialed in, make sure you lock these two nuts back down and then safety wire them so they don't come off. On the Hartzell prop, what you'll see is this is the way you adjust it here. The center nut actually takes an Allen key. I think it's a 3/16, but it's not certain. And there's a 9/16 nut around it. Use a box end, you'll loosen up that nut and then turn the center one to change the pitches, low pitch stops, okay? So once you got that set up, then you come around and just leave your governor locked in. What you want to do is, because you won't be able to check this governor until actually you break ground on the first flight. And right about the time you break ground, you want to see 2690, 2700 RPMs. If it goes much past that, 2720 would certainly be an upper end, even though you can run these at 2750 or so. You want to set it for 2700. What you're going to do is come back and then adjust this. Probably just, again, you'll have to do the same thing, just a couple of test flights, and you'll get it dialed right in where it should be. To lower the RPMs, if you look right in here, we're going to loosen this nut right here I'm pointing to, and you're going to turn this one clockwise so that you push this off of this, just makes it go a little bit longer. Basically, at full prop forward, this hits this stop. So if we don't have enough RPMs, we're going to dial that back, dial it out so it gives it more. If we want less RPMs, we're going to screw that in forward. Okay? So again, please make certain you set up your low-pitched blade stops for a new installation or after a prop overhaul. Most likely they don't come back set up right because they don't know what horsepower or what kind of airplane you have. They'll set it up the way the manufacturer recommends for the majority of the aircraft out there. But we always find that we've got to reset them after an overhaul.
And if you don't reset it, what can happen?
Well, what could happen if you don't set these up properly, first off, you can get an overspeed on the first flight. Let's say the governor isn't working. Was that a Carol's query, by the way? So anyway, it could be like a fixed pitch prop. It's just going to keep winding up, and we could go 2750, 2780. In one case, I'm aware of an RV-10 that went to 3,000 RPMs on the first flight. That requires a propeller teardown if you look in the manual. So we set up this low blade pitch stop such that, one, if the governor should fail, we're not going to get that drastic overspeed. We can pull the power back. And we know we could still pretty much use full power to climb and not be oversped on the engine. Okay? So anyway, thanks for listening. And for those of you who maybe are only seeing 2650 or something at takeoff, or 2600, we see that quite a bit on a constant speed propeller. You got some work to do. You got to figure out if it's low blade pitch stops or the governor setting. If you haven't done that, you'd be surprised what 100 extra RPMs will do for the climb rate. Hi everyone, part 2 today. We had a request for somebody to ask us, hey, tell us about the cam locks. So having seen one just last week that wasn't done properly, I thought, well, maybe we ought to spend some time on those. So I know the van stock cowling has a piano hinge along the front, bottom, and sides. It works, but I've always found the cam locks to be, one, a lot easier to take the cowling on and off, and they seem to last a little longer. These here have already a little over 2,100 hours on them, and they're working fine. These are the Skybolt fasteners. I really, really like those because they're infinitely adjustable. So just some tricks on installing those that I've learned, especially since I just saw a cowling that was done wrong. And I think part of it was maybe just not reading the directions, but you do need to have your cowling put together first. Make a nice straight edge between the two halves and kind of have it lined up here where you're going to have your final cut made. Then what you can do, what I usually do, is rivet a piece of aluminum onto this cowling here to mount the cam locks. Or I keep calling them cam locks, they're Skybolt fasteners. They do actually now and there, they have a kit to actually give you these metal pieces to rivet to the cowling, much like they look a lot like the ones that I made up here. Now the problem that I saw with the one that had already been done was he had these mounted and had not made this cut nor marked where these holes are. So that's going to be a little bit of a challenge to figure that out and make a nice cut here. So again, make this cut. Get your cowling fit nicely, and then drill for these. Put these on drill, and then you can mount these Skybolt fasteners. Again, I think they work better, to each their own. One of the things I would caution you on when you're doing these is you want to pay attention to some cowlings, depending on which engine you have. Some of the larger engines, you know, if you're putting some of the higher horsepower engines in the side-by-side RVs, is pay attention with the Skybolt fastener when you do your layout, because sometimes you'll get pretty close here to the rocker cover, and you already have your hole drilled. So maybe mark on the outside of your lower cowling where you want the fasteners to go, so they do in fact miss the rocker covers. This is cylinder 2. Cylinder 1 is a little more forward, and it ends up being quite close to the cowling. So you want to pay attention, especially on that side. Hopefully that answers the questions on Skybolt cam lock fasteners versus the piano hinge.